I think failure is bad. I don't think it's good. But if something's important enough, then you do it even though the risk of failure is high.
Entrepreneurship is one of the hardest things that you're ever going to do in your life, and it's totally worth it.
I think just generally the path to leadership should not be through, basically MBA business school situation. It should be kind of work your way up, do useful things.
Rise and shine, it's Entspresso time. Hey, it's Carmichael, and I am not a morning person. But when you start your day with an inspiring routine that gets you motivated for success, like watching one of these videos, it will change your life. So let's start your day off right together. Grab your coffee, know that I believe in you, and get ready for a shot of Entspresso from Elon Musk.
I wake up every morning. Espresso keep me going. I wake up every morning.
I think failure is bad. I don't think it's good. But if something's important enough, then you do it even though the risk of failure is high. And so I think my advice if somebody wants to start a company is they should bear in mind that the most likely outcome is that it's not going to work. And they should reconcile themselves to that strong possibility. And they should only do it if they feel that they are really compelled to do it. Right. Because it's gonna the way starting a company works is like usually in the very beginning it's kind of fun, and then it's really hellish for a number of years.
You talked about chewing glass.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine who's a successful entrepreneur, and started actually his career around the same time as I did, and he has a good phrase. His name's Bill Lee. He said, "Yeah, starting a company is like eating glass and staring into the abyss," and
you agree with that?
Generally true. Yeah.
Entrepreneurship is one of the hardest things that you're ever going to do in your life, and it's totally worth it. It's totally worth it. Whether it actually works out or not, most entrepreneurs will fail. Something like 85% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. Most businesses won't work, but it's totally worth it. Why? Because you're showing yourself that you bet on yourself. You're showing yourself that you're following through and taking action on your ideas, that you're worthy. You're showing yourself that you're worthy. You're showing yourself that you believe in you. And if you keep doing that, you're gonna win. The path to living a happy life, a fulfilled life, a life that you're proud of, is one where you continue to show up for yourself. And the minute that you stop, when you stop showing up for yourself, when you just throw in the towel and say, this is over, I'm just gonna work for somebody else, I'm gonna help somebody else build their dreams instead of chasing down mine, that's when life starts to fall apart. That's the path down to unhappiness and depression. And it doesn't mean that everybody has to be an entrepreneur, but what you have to do is continue to bet on yourself. You have to continue to bet on your ideas. You have to continue to say, I came up with this good idea, and because I came up with it, therefore it's a worthy endeavor for me to chase it down. I got asked on my live stream yesterday, how do I know when to quit? Is quitting bad? Do I quit on something? How do I know when to quit? Some people say never give up, always keep going, and some people are the opposite. So what's the right advice? The right answer is, if you love it, you have to keep going. If you love it, you have to find a way to keep going. So for a lot of cases, that's what entrepreneurship is. You've got a dream, you've got a mission, you've got some goals that you genuinely love, that you really want to build, to create, to serve, to help people with. And it's that love that's gonna keep you going. Because in the early days, it's gonna suck. It's the chewing glass and eating to the abyss, right? You have that moment of high at the beginning of, I'm gonna start this thing, oh my God, this is so exciting. And then you land into the valley of no momentum, nothing working, no results, nobody praising you anymore, nobody celebrating you for starting the business. Now you're in the actual running of it and you're not getting the results that you want. And you're trying to show how you're winning and post it on Instagram, but you're not, and you know you're not, and you feel like a fraud. And this is the life cycle that a lot of entrepreneurs go through. But if you love it, you have to keep going. You have to. You could be a lot more honest. You could be a lot more vulnerable. You could be a lot more authentic. You can understand that you don't have to do this all by yourself. This is my biggest problem. When I started my company, I was failing. I was flat out failing. I was $300 a month, like failing. And I was too embarrassed and ashamed to tell my friends that I was failing. I wanted to look like I was doing well because I turned down the jobs that they all went and got, and they're all making high 5-figure, low 6-figure jobs out of university, and I'm making $300 a month. I was just embarrassed. I was just too embarrassed. And I made it harder on myself to be alone. You don't have to be alone. You can make it easier by just letting people in. When you're down in the dumps, being by yourself is usually the worst thing. If you can be around other people, especially people who support you, a lot of people will. Let's circle back to the idea that if you don't love it, you're going to regret it. Why do you have to keep going? Why do you have to keep going? Why is it so important if you love it? Because you will regret it. Because you will look back on this moment in your life and say, I should have done more. I could have done more. I regret not giving it one more week, one more month, one more year. I regret it. You will regret it. That's the only thing that saved my first business. I quit on my partner. I told him, I'm done. I need to feel like I'm a valuable human again. Nothing I'm doing is working, and I hate how this makes me feel as a person. Nothing against you or the business, just how I feel. I need to feel like I'm valuable again somehow. That was the conversation. And then the next day I woke up and I said, I can't quit because I'm going to regret this. I know I'm going to regret this. I'm going to be an old man at 40. I'm 41 now. I'm going to be an old man at 40 and regret that I wasted my life and I didn't do this thing. And that's the only thing that gave me the courage, the motivation, the energy to get back up and just keep going. You will regret this. If you love it and you stop now, you will regret this for your entire life. Now, on the flip side, I think there are many things that you should quit on sooner. The difference is if you don't love it, you need to quit on it. If you don't love it anymore, and maybe you never loved it in the first place, then you need to move on because you will never win doing work that you hate. The people who are at the top of their game, people that I've studied, how many successful people have I studied and profiled and showcased on all of these channels? How many? So many people, right? The one thing they all have in common is that they love what they do. They love the process. They love the work. They love the grind. It's not a grind for them because they're in it so much and they love it. So that's who you're going up against, right? And if you don't love it, you're always going to lose. No matter how smart you are, you're going to lose because you're going up against people who absolutely love the thing. And so that's what you need. You need to be loving your thing. And so if you're in it just as a strategy, you're going to lose. Move on immediately as soon as your heart's not into it. Either sell it, or if it's too new, then you just flat out move on. I think people stay in relationships for too long. I think people stay in businesses for too long because you're afraid of failure, because you're afraid of what it means if you quit on something and go to something else. You're afraid of what people are going to say. You're afraid of what the person looking back at you in the mirror is going to think if you quit. You're afraid of the uncertainty of where to go next, because if this thing, at least I know what this thing is doing. I don't know what the future holds for me if I go somewhere else. A lot of people are handcuffed by having a little bit of money, not a lot, but enough to survive. And that then prevents them from taking the next jump, which they actually need to do because their heart's not in the thing. So many people start a business because they're just trying to make money. People ask me, what's the number one business to get into for this year to make a lot of money? That's the wrong question. You're asking that question, you're going to lose. You can't start with how to make money. You start with the thing that you love that brings value, and inside of that, you're making money. Making money is important, 100%. If you don't make money, you will not have a business. Making money has to be in your top 5 of priorities. But if you make it number 1, you're gonna lose, because you're always gonna be chasing the next hot thing, never get good enough at anything to actually be the best in the world, which is actually how you start to make a lot of money. You need to be the best in the world at something. How do you get that? By loving the thing so much, and by wanting to serve and help people get better at it too. That's how you win. So people start businesses just because it's the hot business of the year. and then they fail. And you should quit on those businesses. Yes, faster, quit sooner. So the answer to should I quit on this? Big decisions with your heart and small ones with the head. It might be a super logical decision to keep going on here because you think you can make a lot of money, but your heart's set into it. You need to move on. But if you love it and it's just not working yet, your brain will often tell you, this isn't working, stop. But your heart's saying, no, but I'm going to regret this. I have to keep going. I have to find a way. You make the big decisions with your heart and the small ones with your head. They're often in conflict. Your brain is designed to keep you safe. Your brain is designed to understand the world that currently exists, where your heart can make something new that's never been created before. Your brain doesn't understand that. And so they're in conflict. And too often the brain wins because you're scared. The brain wins because you're scared. You're scared of it not working out. You're scared of the failure. You're just scared. You're scared. You're scared of rejection. You'll find, but because it's your brain, you'll find a reason why you can't do it. You don't have the time, you don't have the money, you don't have the connections, you have the education, it's not for someone like you can't do it, right? Your brain will find a really smart reason because your brain doesn't want to just admit that you're scared. You're just scared. Your heart knows what's right in the big decisions. Your heart knows what's right. So you make the big decisions with your heart. And then you bring your brain alongside with you. Say, brain, we're doing this. Now help me figure out how, because you're the smart one. Make the big decisions in life with your heart, small ones with the head. Now I've got some special bonus clips that I think you're gonna enjoy, but before that, it's time for the question of the day. I wanna know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week? When you watch a video and just get motivated, the science says you have a 35% chance of following through. That's it, 35%, that's not enough. Guys, we're here, you have a mission. You have to take action and build something important. But when you get motivated and then create a specific plan of action outlining how you're going to do it, you have a 91% chance of following through. And when you commit publicly to others, it jumps to 95%. That's what I want for you. So, question of the day, your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week, put it down in the comments below so I can celebrate you. Also, if you want to have more self-confidence, self-love, self-belief, check out my 254 series. The science says it can take up to 254 days of consecutive action to build a new habit. So I've created a new free training to help you get there. I'm going to be with you every step of the way and send you an unlisted video for free to your email to help you shift your self-belief forward. The link to sign up for free is in the description below.
There are just times when something is important enough, you believe in it enough that you do it in spite of the fear. That ended up being worse than if we had designed a car from the beginning. When you want to do something new, you have to apply the physics approach. I think it's also important to reason from first principles rather than by analogy. So the normal way that we conduct our lives is we reason by analogy. We're doing this because it's like something else that was done, or it's like what other people are doing.
Me too type ideas.
Yeah, slight iterations on a theme, and it's kind of mentally easier to reason by analogy rather than from first principles. But by first principles is kind of a physics way of looking at the world, and what that really means is you kind of boil things down to the most fundamental truths, and say, okay, what are we sure is true, or as sure as possible is true? And then reason up from there. That takes a lot more mental energy.
Give me an example of that. Like, what's one thing that you've done that on that you feel has worked for you?
Sure. So somebody could say, in fact, people do, that battery packs are really expensive, and that's just the way they'll always be, because that's the way they've been in the past. You're like, well, no, that's pretty dumb, because if you applied that reasoning to anything new, then you wouldn't be able to ever get to that new thing. I had a lot of friends of mine try to talk me out of starting a rocket company because they thought it was crazy, and one friend of mine made me watch a video of rockets blowing up. And there were just lots of people that thought it was a really crazy idea, and there was some people that had tried to start rocket companies, not succeeded, and they tried to talk me out of it. And
But the thing is that the premise for talking me out of it was, well, we think you're going to lose the money that you invest. I was like, well, that was my expectation anyway. Right. So I don't really mind if I lose. I mean, I might, but I mean, it's not like I was trying to figure out the rank ordered best way to invest money, and on that basis, chose space.
Right.
It's not like that's. I thought, wow.
You weren't looking at like money market bonds, AAA bonds,
right, exactly.
rocket company.
Like,
you weren't like
do real estate.
Yeah,
invest in shoemaking, anything. And space is highest ROI.
Exactly.
That is not what that wasn't the premise. I just thought that it was important that humanity expand beyond Earth, and we weren't doing that. So maybe there was something I could do to kind of spur that on.
2008 in particular was awful because we had the third launch failure in a row of our Falcon 1 vehicle at SpaceX, the Tesla financing round that we were raising fell apart because the economy was going to tailspin. And it's pretty hard to raise money for a startup car company, late 2008 when GM and Chrysler are busy going bankrupt. Mm-hmm. That was tough. And then Solar City had to deal with Morgan Stanley, and Morgan Stanley had to renege on the deal because they themselves were running out of money. So it looked like all three companies were going to die. Mm-hmm. And I was also going through a divorce. So that was definitely a low point.
So it's 2008, you're going through a divorce, which like some, to borrow your word, douchebag bloggers are writing about to make even worse.
Right, yes, that's true. In addition to all that stuff happening, I was getting dumped on massively in the press.
Right.
Yeah.
It looks like all three companies are going to fail. I mean, why do you keep going with all three? Like, I feel like even a lot of great entrepreneurs in that situation would have been like, I've already sunk everything I have in these companies, and I got to pick one. But you didn't. I mean, you kept doing all three. Why?
That was a very tough call. At the end of 2008, that was probably one of the toughest calls I've had to make, because I could either reserve capital for one company or the other. I mean, fortunately, Solar City didn't need a ton of capital, so they were okay. But between SpaceX and Tesla, it's sort of like if you've got two kids, and what do? Do you spend all your money to maximize the probability of success of one, or do you try to keep both alive? Fortunately, it worked.
Maybe I'll just blank out the word doubt. No, I mean, to be totally frank, I doubted us too. So I thought we, had maybe, when starting SpaceX, maybe had a 10% chance of reaching orbit. So to those who doubted us, I was like, well, I think you're probably right. I mean, the number of times that I was told, like, because I was taking the money that I earned from PayPal and rolling it into to create SpaceX and Tesla, and I ended up spending it all. It wasn't the intention, but almost both companies went bankrupt. Frankly, 2008 was a tough year. It took us 4 attempts just to get to orbit with Falcon 1. But a lot of times people would tell me this joke, like, how do you make a small fortune in the rocket industry? You start with a large one, is the punchline. And I was like, okay, I already heard that joke 12,000 times, Anyway, and it almost came true. We just barely made it there, that 4th launch of Falcon 1. That's all the money we had for that 4th launch. And then, and that wasn't even enough to save the company. We also then had to win the NASA cargo resupply contract. So that came a little after, a little bit later, or right towards the end of 2008. Those are the two key things that saved SpaceX. Otherwise, we would have, not made it. So hey, I think those doubters their probability assessment was correct. But fortunately, fate has smiled upon us and brought us to this day. One does have to be focused on the short term and money coming in when creating a company, because otherwise the company will die. So I think that a lot of times people think like creating a company is going to be fun. I would say it's not. It's really not that fun. I mean, there are periods of fun, and there are periods of where it's just awful. And particularly if you're the CEO of the company, you actually have a distillation of all the worst problems in the company. There's no point in spending your time on things that are going right. So you only spend your time on things that are going wrong. And there are things that are going wrong that other people can't take care of. So you have like the worst. You have a filter for the crappiest problem in the company, the most pernicious and painful problem. So I wouldn't say I think you have to feel quite compelled to do it, and have a fairly high pain threshold. And there's a friend of mine who says like starting a company is like staring into the abyss and eating glass. And there's some truth to that. The staring into the abyss part is that you're going to be constantly facing the extermination of the company. Because most startups fail. It's like 90%, arguably 99% of startups fail. So that's the staring into the abyss part. You're constantly saying, okay, if I don't get this right, the company will die. It can be quite stressful. And then the eating glass part is you've got to do the problems. You've got to work on the problems that the company needs you to work on, not the problems you want to work on. And so that's you end up working on problems that you'd really wish you weren't working on. And so that's the eating glass part. And that goes on for a long time.
So how do you keep your focus on the big picture when you're constantly faced with, we could be out of business in a month?
Well, it's just a very small percentage of mental energy is on the big picture. Like you know where you're generally heading for, and the actual path is going to be some sort of zigzaggy thing in that direction. And try not to deviate too far from the path that you want to be on, but you're going to have to do that to some degree. But I don't want to diminish the. I mean, I think the profit motive is a good one if the rules of an industry are properly set up. So there's nothing fundamentally wrong with profit. In fact, profit just means that people are paying you more for whatever you're doing than you're spending to create it. That's a good thing. and if that's not the case, then you'll be out of business, and rightfully so. Because you're not adding enough value.
I think that the way that we currently do education is wrong, and when you see something like the Khan Academy and so forth, I think that's probably going in the right direction. I mean, generally you want education to be like as close to a video game as possible, like a good video game. Like, you do not need to tell your kid to play video games. They will play video games on autopilot all day. So if you can make it interactive and engaging, then you can make education far more compelling and far easier to do. So I think that's how it should be. And it shouldn't be that you've got like these grades where people move in lockstep. And so everyone goes through, goes like normally, we'll go through English, math, science and so forth from like 5th grade to 6th grade to 7th grade, like it's an assembly line. But people are not objects on an assembly line. That's a ridiculous notion. People learn and are interested in different things at different paces. So you really want to disconnect the whole grade level thing from the subjects. Allow people to progress at the fastest pace that they can or are interested in each subject.
In the beginning, nobody wanted a Tesla, I can tell you that. When we made the original sort of roadster sports car, people were like, well, why would I want an electric car? My gasoline car works fine. I'm like, no, electric car is better, I should try it. And it was hard to get people to do a test drive. First of all, nobody knew who we were. I'd never heard of this company. I'm like, yeah, we're named after Nikola Tesla. You know that guy? Nope. So for sure we were doing push in the beginning because people said there was no one telling us that they wanted an electric car. So it was not out of like, it was like lots of people coming up to me saying, hey, I really want an electric car. I heard that 0 times.
So we were like, it's like, man, we're gonna make an electric car and show that these things can be good, and then people want them. It's like, I think it was like Henry Ford said that, like if we're talking about the Model T, it's like if you ask the public what they wanted, they'd say a faster horse. Mm-hmm. So if you did like a big survey and said, hey, public, before automobiles, what would you like? It's like, well, I'd like my horse to go 3 miles an hour faster and eat less food and, be stronger and live longer and that kind of thing. There'll all be basically a bunch of incremental improvements on a horse. Because people, when you say like, well, what about an automobile, like car that drives itself? Like, what are you talking about? That sounds crazy. But when you actually make an automobile and give it to people and say, okay, now this is a horse where you can keep it in the barn, and if you leave for a month, it's still alive. Yeah. So carry more weight than a horse and go further and that kind of thing. So anyway, it's like when it's a radically new product, people don't know that they want it because it's just not in their scope. I think when they first started making TVs, they did a nationwide survey. I think this might have been like 46 or 48. It's like a famous nationwide survey. Will you ever buy a TV? Now, it was like 96% of respondents said no. Some crazy number. Like basically everyone's like, would you buy a TV? And maybe they put a price in there or something, I don't know. But it was famously, almost everyone said they would not buy a TV, but they didn't know what they're talking about.
So the big game-changing stuff at the beginning is a company push kind of a thing most of the time. But then changes to the product over time can be a lot more customer pull kind of a focus.
Yeah, changes to the product over time can be incremental changes. Then customers can certainly tell you, it's good to get customer feedback to say, how can we improve the product? And once they're using it, they can say, okay, I like this thing about it, I don't like this other thing, and then we can improve the product over time. Customer feedback after they have the fundamental thing is great.
If you think of like what is education, like you're basically downloading data and algorithms into your brain. And it's actually amazingly bad in conventional education, because like it shouldn't be like this huge chore. So you're making it way better. But I mean, I think a lot of the things that I would say you've probably heard 100 times, and in fact are if not doing. Like the more you can gamify the process of learning, the better. Like for my kids, I do not have to encourage them to play video games.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I have to like pry them from their hands, like crack.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It's like drop that crack needle.
Yeah, yeah. You have that problem at your house too.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
The crack is addictive. Yeah.
So it's it's to the degree that you can make somehow learning like a game, then it's better. And I think unfortunately, like a lot of education is very vaudevillian. You've got someone standing up there kind of lecturing at people, and they've done the same lecture 20 years in a row, and they're not very excited about it. And that lack of enthusiasm, is conveyed to the students. That they're not very excited about it. They don't know why they're there. Like, why are we learning this stuff? We don't even know why. In fact, I think a lot of things people learn, probably there's no point in learning them. Because they never use them in the future.
Because who's going to launch a rocket into space? I mean, that's just like, yeah, exactly. That never happens.
Well, you have to say, like, people, I think, don't stand back and say, well, why are we teaching people these things? And we should tell them probably why we're teaching these things. Because a lot of kids just in school kind of puzzled as to why they're there. And I think if you can explain the why of things, then that makes a huge difference to people's motivation.
Yeah.
Then they understand purpose.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty important.
The real way I think you actually achieve intellectual property protection is by innovating fast enough. If your rate of innovation is high, then you don't need to worry about protecting the IP because other companies will be copying something that you did years ago. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. Just make sure your rate of innovation is fast. speed of innovation is what matters. And I do say this to my teams like quite a lot, that innovation per unit time, as I go innovation per year, if you want to say it, like is what matters, not innovation absent time. Because if you wanted to make, say, 100% improvement in something, and that took 100 years or 1 year, that's radically different. So it's like, what is your rate of innovation? That matters. And is the rate of innovation, is that accelerating or decelerating? And a weird thing happens when companies get big is that most companies or organizations, the bigger they get, they tend to get less innovative. Not just less innovative on a per person basis, but less innovative in the absolute. And I think this is probably because the incentive structure is not there for innovation. It's not enough to use words to encourage innovation. The incentive structure must be aligned with that. That's fundamental.
You're CEO of 2 companies, you're chairman of Solar City. Talk about time management. How on earth do you do this?
Well,
do you get any sleep?
Yeah, sometimes not enough. Sleep is really great because I find if I don't get enough sleep, then I'm quite grumpy. I mean, obviously, I think most people are that way. And also, like I try to sort of figure out what's the right amount of sleep, because I found I could drop below a certain threshold of sleep, and although I'd be awake more hours and I could sustain it, I would get less done because my mental acuity would be affected. So I found generally the right number for me is around 6 to 6.5 hours on average per night.
That's not too bad.
Yeah.
Right. And any other tips
on average, though?
Right. Any other tips on just managing to run 2 companies simultaneously? I mean, do you find? I mean, I know you're up here Monday, Tuesday. Is it all Tesla when you're up in Silicon Valley, and all SpaceX Wednesday, Thursday?
Having a having a smartphone is incredibly helpful, because that means you can do email during interstitial periods, like if you're in a car, you're walking, in the bathroom, everywhere. You can do email practically when you're awake, and so that's really helpful to have email for SpaceX and Tesla integrated on my phone, and then it's just you have to apply a lot of hours to actually working. So the way I generally do it is I'll be working at SpaceX on Monday, and then Monday night flight to the Bay Area, spend Tuesday and Wednesday in the Bay Area, then at Tesla, and then fly back on Wednesday night, spend Thursday and Friday at SpaceX. In the last several months, then I would fly back here on a Saturday and either spend Saturday and Sunday at Tesla or spend Saturday at Tesla and Sunday at SpaceX. I think of these things as just, there's a certain amount of time, and within that time, you want the best net outcome. So for all the set of actions that you can do, there's going to be some of which will fail, some of which will succeed, and you want the net useful output of your set of actions to be the highest. I have to use a baseball analogy. Baseball, they don't let you just sit there and wait for the perfect pitch until you get a real easy one. They can give you 3 shots, and the third one, they say, okay, and they get off they go back to put somebody else up there. So your 3 strikes on the baseball, not on bat anymore. So what you're really looking for is what's the batting average? How you doing on score, and just there's going to be some amount of failure, but you want your net output
net useful output to be maximized. Failure is essentially irrelevant unless it is catastrophic.
How much of your success do you attribute to having really audacious goals, or versus just not being focused on the short term, money coming in, or I don't know, investors?
Unfortunately, one does have to be focused on the short term and money coming in when creating a company, because otherwise the company will die. So I think that a lot of times people think like creating a company is going to be fun. I would say it's not. It's really not that fun. I mean, there are periods of fun, and there are periods of where it's just awful. And particularly if you're the CEO of the company, you actually have a distillation of all the worst problems in the company. There's no point in spending your time on things that are going right. So you only spend your time on things that are going wrong. And there are things that are going wrong that other people can't take care of. So you have like the worst. You have a filter for the crappiest problem in the company, the most pernicious and painful problem. So I wouldn't say I think you have to feel quite compelled to do it, and have a fairly high pain threshold. And there's a friend of mine who says like starting a company is like staring into the abyss and eating glass. And there's some truth to that. The staring into the abyss part is that you're going to be constantly facing the extermination of the company. Because most startups fail. It's like 90%, arguably 99% of startups fail. So that's the staring into the abyss part. You're constantly saying, okay, if I don't get this right, the company will die. It can be quite stressful. And then the eating glass part is you've got to do the problems. You got to work on the problems that the company needs you to work on, not the problems you want to work on. And so that's you end up working on problems that you'd really wish you weren't working on. And so that's the eating glass part. And that goes on for a long time.
Young people globally who want to be like Elon Musk. What's your advice to them?
I think that probably they shouldn't want to be.
You?
I think it sounds better than it is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not as much fun being me as you'd think. I don't know.
You don't think so?
No. It could be worse for sure, but it's. I'm not sure I'm not sure I want to be me.
Okay.
But if I think advice. I mean, if you want to make progress in things, I think that the best analytical framework for understanding the future is physics. I'd recommend studying the thinking process around physics, like not the equations. I mean, the equations certainly they're helpful, but the way of thinking in physics is it's the best framework for understanding things that are counterintuitive. And always taking the position that you are to some degree wrong, and your goal is to be less wrong over time. I think one of the biggest mistakes people generally make, and I'm guilty of it too, is wishful thinking. Like you want something to be true, even if it isn't true. And so you ignore the things that, you ignore the real truth because of what you want to be true. This is a very difficult trap to avoid. And like I said, it's certainly one that I find myself in having problems with. But if you just take that approach of you're always to some degree wrong, and your goal is to be less wrong, and solicit critical feedback, particularly from friends. Like particularly friends, if somebody loves you, they want the best for you. They don't want to tell you the bad things. So you have to ask them, and say, really, I really do want to know. and then they'll tell you.
I remember when you first told me that you were thinking about tunnels.
When did I first tell you about that?
Years ago.
Okay, it's like a long time ago.
Yeah,
like
I thought you were joking.
Yeah. It was. I was joking, but it's not because of some epiphany that I had one day driving down the 405. That's how it gets translated somehow. I was talking about tunnels for years and years. For probably 5 years or 4 years at least, whenever I'd give a talk and people would ask me about what opportunities do you see in the world, I'd say tunnels. Can someone please build tunnels? So after 4 or 5 years of begging people to build tunnels, and still no tunnels, I was like, okay, I want to build a tunnel. So like maybe I'm missing something here. So I was like basically talking people's ears off of tunnels for several years, and then said, well, let's find out what it takes to build a tunnel. And so I started digging a tunnel. I wanted to start the tunnel from where I could see it from my office at SpaceX. So I said, well, let's just carve off a part of the parking lot across the road so I can see if anything's happening or not. And then we named our first boring machine Godot, because I kept waiting for it. It never came. Finally it did. And we got it going. And now we're making good progress.
When did it occur to you that Zip2 might be a success?
Well, when we first started out, I think our ambitions were really quite low. It was really to make enough money to pay the rent.
Yeah, we got a VC give us money. That was,
yay!
Yeah. We thought it was all over then.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, when we started out in '95, we literally, at the beginning, we had one computer, which would be the web server during the day, and then at night, I'd program on it. And
we'd sleep in the office.
Yeah,
we couldn't afford to have an apartment.
It was cheaper to rent the office than to rent an apartment, so we just rented the office and slept in the office and showered at the YMCA.
Showered at the YMCA. And for me, the worst part was eating at Jack in the Box 3 times a week.
Yeah, man, this like,
I'll sleep
it's really difficult to get food at Palo Alto after like 10 p.m. It's like Jack in the Box and a few other options. So we rotated through the Jack in the Box menu. At the end of '95, that's essentially we're just sleeping in the office and showering at the YMCA. And then around the end of '95 is when Netscape went public. And then whether or not somebody knew what the internet was, they knew that you could make money on the internet somehow, or even if it's only on the greater fool theory. So when we went and talked to venture capitalists in early '96, there was a much greater interest in what we were doing. In fact, the round closed in like maybe a week or something.
It's crazy. Yeah, we went from sleeping in the office to people throwing, again, this is a financial crowd, so you guys see these numbers every day, but for us to hear, we'll give you $3 million.
Yeah, it sounded extremely, we thought they were crazy. Like, why would they do that?
It was literally like, these people are insane.
They obviously do not realize we're sleeping in the office.
In fact, when they did fund us, they realized that we were illegal immigrants.
Well,
yes, we were.
I'd say it's a gray area.
Yeah, yes, we were. We were illegal immigrants. We were sleeping in the office. We didn't have a car. We had one car, but the wheel kept falling off.
Well, actually, yeah, the wheel did actually fall off the car.
Yes, exactly. And the venture capitalists actually bought us cars.
Yeah, well, they gave us 40 grand.
It was 40 grand to go buy cars, which was at the time was more money than we've ever seen.
What motivations do people need to harness to try to make change, as opposed to just reading about change? And that's not supposed to be an easy question. I don't mean like, oh, it's this.
Well, like I said, I think if you study engineering and you figure out how to design new things, then it's relatively easy to start a company. You just need to get a few like-minded people with you, and then focus on creating a prototype, a compelling prototype, as soon as possible. And then, there's a strong venture capital industry in this country that will give you funding to take things to the next level, and that's all there is to it. And you might, if you try it a few times, you may or may not succeed. But I think sometimes people fear starting a company too much. You have to say, really, what's the worst that could go wrong? You're not going to starve to death. You're not going to die of exposure. What's the worst that could go wrong? Well, I think part of the problem, the reason people aren't as excited about space is that we haven't been pushing the frontier as much.
And so you can only watch the same movie so many times before it gets a little boring. And you know, in the 60s and early 70s, we were really pushing the frontier of human spaceflight. And obviously those landing on the moon is regarded as one of the greatest achievements of humanity, of arguably of life itself. And even though only a handful of people went to the moon, vicariously we all went there. Well, at least I wasn't alive at the time, but retrospectively. And you know, and it was just one of those really inspiring things that I think made everyone glad to be, you know, human. You know, it's like the things that they're bad things humanity does, and they're good things, and this is one of the good things. And I do think it's important that we have these inspiring things that make you glad to get up in the morning, and glad to be a member of the human race. And we need to push that frontier. And I think the great goal we should be trying to pursue is trying to make life make life multiplanetary. Mm-hmm. So to establish a self-sustaining and growing civilization on another planet, Mars being the only realistic possibility. And I think that would just be one of the greatest things humanity could ever try to do.
We're focused on, like I said, it is important to have the objective be right. That's why I was talking so much about the importance of making Mars a self-sustaining, building a self-sustaining city on Mars. If that's the objective, then obviously, you know, just putting some satellites in orbit that's not important. You have to achieve full and rapid reusability. I emphasize full and rapid. Reusability is only relevant to the degree it's rapid and complete. And then you also have to do orbital refilling. This is essential as well. And then propellant production on Mars, also essential. So, you know, and with that as the goal, then, you know, that means that creates, I think, a good forcing function for radical innovation, because in the absence of radical innovation, we have no chance of meeting that goal. Whereas if our goal is simply, you know, defeat Lockheed and Boeing or something like that, we would probably achieve. You've already done it. That really wasn't even a thing, you know. Yeah. I wish it was. Like they're not really not even trying to do reusability, which is bizarre because they make planes that are reusable. So, I mean, if they talk to if they talk to one of their customers, buys a Lockheed fighter jet or a Boeing aircraft, like, hey, we're going to sell you a 737 that can be used once, and it's not 737 Max. But that turns out that was a single-use airplane at times. But it really. It would be an absurd thing for them to sell a single-use aircraft, but they feel quite comfortable selling a single-use rocket. And anyway, but if our goal was simply we're going to be the leaders in launching the conventional satellites that exist, we would probably approach that on a sort of a logarithmic basis, where you know you'd get there and you'd sort of slowly make progress towards doing 10 launches a year, 12 launches a year, and while they do 6 or something like that. I don't know. But since the goal is, hey, we need to make life multiplanetary before it's too late, and time really matters. So it's like we're shooting for Mars, not just the moon. It's not let's shoot for the moon, shoot for Mars. And then these competitive things are kind of small things along the way. Unless somebody else is shooting for Mars, they will not be competitive with something as pedestrian as launching a few satellites into Earth orbit.
I think just generally the path to leadership should not be through, basically MBA business school situation. It's like, it should be kind of work your way up, do useful things, and there's a bit too much of somebody goes to a high-profile MBA school and then kind of parachutes in as the leader, but they don't actually know how things work. They can be good at, say, PowerPoint presentations or something like that, and they can present well, but they don't actually know how things work
because they did not, they parachute in instead of like working their way out.
They never went through an apprenticeship, for lack of a better word.
They're kind of like just not aware of what's really needed for to make great products. So I mean, I don't want to trash MBAs too much here, and I actually do have a dual undergrad, Wharton undergrad, and physics at UPenn. So. So I have like, I have direct exposure to business school, and I went, to do undergrad business school with physics. But and I was a teaching assistant for 2 semesters, and I graded MBAs and undergrads. But I think it's just a little bit too much. Like people look at MBA school as like I want to parachute into being the boss instead of earning it, and like I don't think that's good.
When you were in college developing these skills, you wanted to do some things that were of benefit to humanity. Why did you think that?
Well,
because not everyone does.
I guess it was, I had sort of an existential crisis of like, what does it all mean, and what's the meaning, what's the meaning of life, and
was this 3 a.m. over a beer, or this was more serious than that?
It probably goes back to high school, I guess. I don't want to give a laboriously long answer, but I was, I had sort of a dark childhood. It wasn't good. Probably partially brought on by reading some of the philosophers. Like, don't ever read Schopenhauer and Nietzsche if you're 14. It's not good.
Yeah, or Ayn Rand either, too.
Yeah. So I was just trying to figure out what does it all mean. And actually, when I read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I think is a great work of philosophy, that sort of highlighted the point that very often the issue is understanding what questions to ask. And if you can properly frame the question, then the answer is the easy part. So I thought things that expand the scope and scale of the human consciousness and allow us to better ask questions and achieve greater enlightenment, those are good things. And so that's sort of what can we do that's going to most likely lead to that outcome.
If you want another amazing Elon Musk video, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
When my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch.
I was working hard.